So today we're going to be talking about the live edge part of slabs, with some different pointers and things to consider when picking out a slab for your project. Also, we will be discussing some methods to remove the bark and expose the texture underneath. We'll start by looking at this slab here. This is walnut, and the bark was taken off shortly after the tree was taken down, after the slab was cut. So we have a really clean, consistent look. On some of these slabs here, the bark was on for quite a while, and you can see some marks where the bugs got in, some beetles, and started chewing away the wood. They added a lot of neat character there, but it gives it a lot more figuring. Here are some hickory, and you can see the same characteristic bug tracks here. These are really pretty, but again, it's different than a nice clean edge like that. On these slabs, all of them have the bark taken off, but sometimes you'll come across a slab like some of these over here that still have the bark on them. Bark usually stays on a tree and starts to decompose and fall off as the tree sits for a long time or is dead or on the ground. So some of the trees that the bark actually stays on the best are ones that were freshly cut. If we wanted to take the bark off of here to expose some of the characteristic wood underneath, we'll discuss some of those techniques later on in the video. So I have here a couple pine slabs just to show you some differences in the edge and the appearance you can get. This one here had pine bark on it. We ground it off just a little bit so it's not so rough. It has a really cool looking texture to it, but it might not be desirable for some. This piece here, we've left a lot of the modeling on the edge, a lot of different color, and so that just adds more character to the piece. So again, it's basically according to your taste. You can sand off or take off as much or as little as you want and kind of make the piece look a little more according to your preference or taste. So now we're going to head to the workshop and we'll show you how to remove bark and some different techniques to do that. All right, some basic tools that you might need are starting off with a chisel, mallet, or a hammer. It's always good to wear some gloves, especially when working with sharp tools. Another piece of equipment or tool which is handy is something called a draw knife. This is a little more specialized, but it really speeds the process up, makes it go real easy. Starting off, I always started with a chisel and a hammer, and it worked great for me. Once I got a draw knife, really was a game changer. So if you don't have one of these, that's okay. You can still do it with some of the tools that you might have at home. So let's get started. So starting off with the chisel, we've got a spot here that the bark started to peel off, so we can start there or just start at the top. Just kind of lightly tap it with your hand. You can use a hammer or mallet if you wish. Basically, I'm just trying to get some of the thicker material off, and then I'm going to go back after the fact and clean up anything that I would like to see gone. There's really no specific technique with using a chisel. Sometimes coming from the side works good to loosen the bark off. Sometimes coming from the top. Just kind of figure out what works for you and use a variety of techniques to remove the bark. Either way, you want to make sure that you're not pushing a sharp object toward your hands in case you slip, so make sure that any of your body parts are behind the chisel. If you notice, I just knocked a little wood chip off there. A couple spots here have kind of gouged into the side. Don't be too concerned about messing up the edge, because as I'll show later, when you sand this off, a lot of those will blend in very nicely. You'll never even know that they're there. So we've done a little bit with the chisel. It's worked great. I'm going to go and do the last half with the draw knife, and we'll just see how that goes. I'm going to throw some clamps on here to kind of secure my slab. And the draw knife, you have to be careful because you are actually pulling that knife toward you. So this one in particular is very sharp, so it will basically slice the bark off. Takes a little bit more technique, but in the end it ends up going a lot faster. Now that I've got the majority of the bark off, I can go back and kind of just hit these edges here that have a little bit more bark material. Anything that's loose, just go back lightly and shave that off. If you notice, I'm still getting into some of the spots of the bark with the edge of the blade. We can sand off those spots later on and blend them into the natural edge of the piece of wood. I might come into a spot where a chisel would be better suited. It's good to have some options for tools. Okay, so we've got most of the bark off. Now from here on, we can sand this edge and kind of feather the look of the wood according to how we want it to turn out. We'll go ahead and get started with some sanding and cleaning up this edge so it'll look really nice. On some spots, you'll find that there's a lot of bug marks where they've been busy eating the bark and making little tracks in here. It adds a whole lot of cool character, but sometimes it can be a little difficult to sand over. So having a wire brush comes in real handy because you can just go back and forth and clean out those little valleys that they created. Basically, you're just trying to knock off any of the loose material so that when you put a finish on, you don't get a lot of sawdust or flakes that come off. Go from a couple different directions. We've cleaned that up good. There's not really much more coming off here. Next, we're gonna go to the sander. Just starting off with some 120, 150 grit. You can use something that's a little more coarse, but just make sure you don't take off too much material. So I usually like to start off with the 120 or 150 grit. We're just gonna sand these edges, kind of getting some of these little cracks and crevices there. You can round over the edges here a little bit. Of course, we would finish the top and all that, but we're just gonna go over this edge for now. So let's get started sanding and see how this thing looks. On some of these live edge pieces, like this piece of cherry, there's a lot of ins and out and valleys, and so just putting the sanding pad flat is gonna go over and miss some spots. So you might have to use more of the tip or the edge of the pad to kind of get in there. You wanna kind of blend it so that it looks even. We've got some modeling here. There's some of the clear wood underneath, but then I've got some of the underlayer of the bark here as well, which I like that character. Here's a little spot that we damaged the edge of the wood with the chisel, and so I'll go ahead and sand that out and show you how to kind of make that little imperfection go away. All right, well that looks pretty good. There's still a little bit of tooling marks there. I like a little bit of that at times because it kind of gives a little bit of a hand-hewn look. But you can see how that was damaged before, and just sanding it out with a little bit of work will basically make it blend into all the other character on the slab here. So again, don't worry about it too much. If you damage some of this, you can always fix it. So we'll go ahead and finish sanding this edge and see how that turns out. All right, well that pretty much cleans up that edge there. Again, you can sand this a lot more and get a different texture, a different look. You can leave it a little bit more rough than what I left it. There's so many different ways you can get a cool appearance out of a live edge or raw edge look on a slab. It's really just up to you for the final appearance, how much you sand, how much you work it. But again, like you've seen, we've damaged it. We've done a few things. We've cleaned that up, sanded the little nicks and scratches out, and really it looks really good. There's still a few tooling marks here. I kind of like leaving those there. If you don't, then just give it a little more attention sanding it, and you kind of blend those in, make them go away, and you'll have an awesome looking piece. So we thank you for watching, and as always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave comments or check out some of the other videos we have on our channel as well.